Left out during the elementary school picnic. Left out during the middle school camp. Left out during the high school trip. Yuilhan was always alone. But when the entire world disappeared, he was left behind. Ignored by humanity. Forgotten by angels. Abandoned by God. For 1,000 years, Yuilhan stayed on Earth alone. No friends. No enemies. Just endless time and relentless training. While humanity leveled up in other worlds, he sharpened his skills in silence. Crafting. Hunting. Becoming something beyond human. And now, humanity has finally returned. The great cataclysm has begun. And the man who trained alone for a millennium is about to show the world what true preparation looks like. Chapter 6. Ha ha ha. Jack, the hotel owner, laughed. He looked at Lee Sungmin's face, then at the things he brought and laughed again. You really got all this by yourself? Teeth of goblins, 5 bottles of blood, poison and others. The blow dart, poison needles and bottles were his to keep. He thought that he may need it in the future. Jack looked down at Sungmin and was lost in thought. Goblins weren't that hard of a monster to kill. It was annoying that they moved in packs, but goblins weren't that bad when they were up against an experienced traveler. Going into the center of their territory may prove to be dangerous, but getting a few around the borders was easy. However, it was a 14-year-old who accomplished this. His surprise increased when he realized that the 14-year-old was a no-class with no skills. Jack ran a hotel, so he met a lot of otherworlders who arrived at Geneavis. The people with martial arts or magic adapted easily. However, a no-class was different. They had no skills to ensure their survival, nor did they have any experience with fighting against monsters. Most of the time, at least 1 month was needed for a no-class to adapt to life in Geneavis and understand the situation they were put in and the need to kill monsters to survive. When did you come here? Yesterday. Lee Sungmin answered truthfully. Jack laughed again at that piece of information. You're 14? Yes. You don't have any skills? Yes. Ha ha ha. Jack laughed again. Jack was curious what he did before coming here, but he didn't ask. It was an unsaid law that people shouldn't ask about one's life in the previous world. They'll pay you well. Ha ha. A strange child came rolling in. A no-class went and killed monsters in just a day. In all honesty, Jack didn't think Sungmin would return alive. There were only a few people who could understand their situation relatively easily and kill some monsters to survive. Usually they didn't come back. Even though they understood, fighting and winning against monsters was a hard thing to do. However, this child came back. It'll reduce the cost by half. Nothing is free. That was the law Jack abided. It's good to have a relationship with such a talented child. If you survive long enough, haha, you could become a high-ranked figure in Geneavis in the future. Yes. Don't forget about me then. Jack laughed loudly and tapped Sungmin's arm. Sungmin laughed as well and went up to his room. Lee Sungmin had many thoughts in his head as he went up the stairs. You'll be a regular. A child with talent. The store owner and Jack said that. In his past life, Sungmin never heard of things like that being said to him or being held up in such high regard. It was especially apparent in this place. Geneavis made the otherworlders understand how cruel and unfair this world was. He understood just by observing Jack and the store owner's attitude towards him. Just having talent alone made it so much easier to get respect from others. Talent, something that I never had before. He sighed and entered his room. 13 years in area made it easy to understand his situation. He never finished the cultivation methods that he studied for a decade and the other skills that he got. It would be easy to get back to that point in his previous life. Why that was possible is because that the skills that he achieved in his past life didn't have any enlightenment. The second-class martial arts grew just by experience. Chase Soul Spear technique was basically only a model. There would be no complete understanding. It was the same for all his skills. One Thunder only had the basics and Iron Skin and the Stone Body used external power. It required some inner strength, but those didn't have enlightenment either. That was the difference between the first and the second class. The first class arts had enlightenment. If you were lucky, you could get the understanding and break the limit of the skills. But not a second class skill. It was only a model and a figure, so there would be nothing to learn. The best it would be is to get close to the first-class skills. I have no strength in my body right now. I don't have stamina or anything. If I get more stamina, the other skills except genuine heavens will grow fast. But it's still only a second-level skill. That made Lee Sung-min very depressed. He needed the talent to overcome his limits. But Lee Sung-min didn't have that talent. He didn't have the gift to turn nothing into something. So he had to rely on the arts with understanding. But he had at least the genuine heavens. That was a first-class art. If he studied enough, he might be able to succeed. The cultivation methods helps increase the limit of the inner strength. If he could learn the genuine heavens, it would be easier to learn more and use more of his inner strength. Regardless, a cultivation method was still a cultivation method. The limit was there. I have a chance. But not yet. I need to get that intelligence potion. Sung-min breathed loudly as he took off his clothes. His body was slightly tired, but he dropped on the ground. He was going to do push-ups every day. He stayed at Jack's hotel and went to the hunting grounds every day. He used his skills as much as he could, bought from the store owner Hans and sold stuff to him as well. He usually fought goblins. He went and figured out where their boundaries were and hunted those who roamed around. He kept gathering blood and teeth. Since his room cost was halved, he had money left after selling the items. Lee Sung-min got the money from Jack. Do you have a interdimensional pocket? About 2 weeks since he came here, he went to Hans and asked. Hans yawned and looked at Sung-min. I have it. The interdimensional pocket would be a necessity for traveler hunting. Having magic, that pocket could hold a lot of stuff even with a small volume. Well, all of them are used and the magic isn't that good either. Let's see. Hans opened the bag right in front of him. Inside, there was darkness. That pocket was a interdimensional pocket. His hand went inside the bag. As he searched, Hans pulled out a small pocket. It's used. I found it in the woods. From a dead body. A large body size, maybe? Are you gonna buy it? How much? 60,000 Iri. Hans laughed. These were pretty expensive. The weight wasn't felt all, and since time didn't flow, food could be stored as well. For a traveler, that was a key item. That's expensive. You want a bargain? They'll cut it to 50,000. Hans laughed loudly and said. But Lee Sung-min shook his head. He only had about 10,000 Iri. Even with running around the forest, he was buying things and using the hotel, so money was hard to get. I really don't have any money. You don't seem like you want a bargain. Whyd you ask. To me, you're the best person who would sell me things for the cheapest price. He needed a interdimensional pocket. But not yet. So he wanted to see how much Hans would sell it for. Hans had an expression that he got hit in the back of the head. Ha ha ha. I've done this job for many years, but it's the first time Eve gotten this much trust from someone. Okay, let's do this. They'll test you. Yes? Lee Sung-min opened his eyes widely at the surprise words. Hans laughed and continued. If you kill 5 orcs and take their eyes, then he'll give you this interdimensional pocket. At that, Lee Sung-min swallowed hard. It had been about 2 weeks since he first arrived, but he still hadn't tried hunting orcs. Orcs were harder to fight. They were strong and powerful. They weren't as intelligent as goblins, but they had enough strength to overcome that intelligence. When does that offer end? Today. Hans said with mischievous face. It's been 2 weeks or so, right? You went to the hunting grounds immediately, and you survived. You have talent, even though it was only rabbits and goblins. If you kill an orc, he'll believe that you have that talent. It wasn't talent. It was experience. He thought that to himself, but he didn't show it. Yes, he'll accept it. Lee Sung-min nodded. Chapter 7. After he arrived at the entrance of the forest, Sung-min opened the huge bag he was carrying on his back. It was a bag that Jack, the owner of the inn, had given to him as a gift. Although the bag was just an ordinary item that wasn't enchanted with a dimensional pocket, it contained everything he needed on this trip. I didn't know I would come face to face against orcs so soon. He wasn't planning on stressing his body until he developed the necessary muscles required to fight. Sung-min's body was only that of a 14-year-old, and he lacked the cultivation and stamina to fight orcs. But now his hands had calloused. He hadn't noticeably grown stronger after 2 weeks of strength training, but his body was more or less accustomed to utilizing his spear technique after days of vigorous exercise. Second stage of the Genuine Heavens Cultivation Method. Second stage of the One Thunder Cultivation Method. Second stage of the Iron Skin Cultivation Method. Second stage of the Stone Body Cultivation Method. Fourth stage of the Chasing Soul Spear Technique. These were Sungmin's current accomplishments in the various cultivation methods. His attainments in the Chasing Soul Spear technique grew the fastest due to this past experiences, but he couldn't bring out its true force due to his lack of muscle development and internal energy. Because of his fragile body, his iron skin and stone body had barely progressed, and because of his lackluster cultivation using One Thunder proved to be difficult as well. He wasn't prepared. He was going to wait at least half a year before fighting the orcs. Sungmin knew from experience how quickly and unexpectedly death could befall on a person. He knew because he died once. He didn't want to die again. Thus, he would thoroughly prepare himself for any possible dangers in this life. It would be a ridiculous joke if he was to be slain by orcs. But this is a rare opportunity to acquire a dimensional pocket. This dimensional pocket worth around 600,000 Eri was something he couldn't easily give up on. There wouldn't be a need to worry about my items breaking either. Sungmin pulled out a glass bottle from his bag. After shaking it a few times, he uncorked the bottle. A distinct scent permeated the air. Concocted using the poison from the goblins as the base, it was a poison that he created using other poisonous plants from the forest per his experience in his previous life. This new solution had the same effect of paralyzing one's opponent like the original goblin poison. But the main difference was in its potency and effectiveness. If the poison was injected into a living organism, it would completely paralyze their entire body in only 5 minutes. It works on orcs. Sungmin knew this because of knowledge from his past life. During a period where he lacked strength, using tricks like these was the only way for him to survive. Feeling relieved that he knew a little bit about poisons, he started rubbing the poison onto his weapon. 5 throwing knives, 1 short sword, and a spear that were all coated in poison. With this, he was ready. Sungmin prepared himself for the worst and stood up. He had already mapped out the general location of the territory of the orcs. Hunting small prey like goblins, rabbits, and boars weren't the only thing he was doing during the past 2 weeks. Gathering information could be as important as one's flesh and blood. I know their patrolling routine, but I still have to be careful. 5 orcs. In my current state, they won't be easy opponents. Wouldn't it be easier if I had a partner helping me out? It wasn't that he did not think about this matter before, but I would have to split the spoils. There was no guarantee that Hans would keep his mouth shut about the dimensional pocket. It would be easier to defeat 5 orcs with a partner, but that partner would then know about the dimensional pocket. There were tens of hundreds of otherworlders that passed through this forest every day. These otherworldlies would usually take caution to not bump into each other. This was due to suspicion. Sungmin was like that as well. Relationships sounded lovely. However, the reality was not so simple. There was no guarantee that his own kindness would be returned. He couldn't trust others, especially when he didn't have any strength right now. Whoosh! An orc was passing by. The mongrel had little equipment. He was wielding an axe with a rusted edge and did not don any armor. Only a piece of worn cloth that could not be called clothes was wrapped around his body. In other regions, there were orcs that possessed decent equipment, but the orcs of Geneavis generally didn't have any exemplary pieces of equipment. But no matter what kind of equipment they had, orcs only amounted to existences who competed with mere goblins. They lacked the intelligence to pose any real threat and could only rely on their brute strength. However, it was still dangerous to underestimate orcs. As much as they lacked intelligence, they made up for with their sharper instincts and strength. Sungmin poured out the bait for the orcs like he did with the goblins. He didn't draw blood on himself like last time. Their sense of smell was more developed than goblins, so they might find him in the midst of his preparation. An ambush. Sungmin chose that. He might have prepared a trap if he had the time. Alas, time was a luxury he didn't have. There was little he could do with his current body, anyways. After brainstorming various ideas, he decided an ambush was the best option. Sung-min swallowed his breath. He couldn't execute his attack from above. Sung-min was ready to use the more potent version of the goblin poison along with the attacking needles. The problem was that he couldn't penetrate the leather cloth of the orcs by spitting the poison needle from his mouth. Because of that, the throwing knives wouldn't work either. He wasn't sure if he could penetrate the bastard's outer cloth even with imbuing his attacks with internal energy. Smell. I can smell 5 patrolling orcs. It matched with the information that Hans gave to him. Hans probably knew that Sung-min was going to hunt the patrolling orcs. Hans would scavenging for items from corpses in the forest and sell them for money. Figuring out the patrol patterns of goblins and orcs should be a cakewalk for him. 5. I want to split them up, but it's not that easy to do. The orcs bent over and started sniffing the air with their pudge noses. It was the place where Sung-min had peed on. Now? No, not yet. Sung-min was lying on the ground as if he were a crawler. He had covered his entire body with mud and dug a light indent on the ground to camouflage himself. Breathing was kept to a minimum. An intense glare hidden somewhere in his dirt-covered face was awaiting the perfect opportunity to strike. It's the scent of a human. Human where? No body. No blood. The orcs were muttering among themselves. It was now. Sung-min threw the rock that he was clenching tightly in his fist into the air. The rock drew a curve and landed behind the orcs. Startled by the sudden sound, the orcs looked behind them to see what it was. As soon as their backs were facing him, Sung-min bolted forward. He swallowed a huge gulp of breath and brandished his short sword instead of the spear. Utilizing the One Thunder technique, he ran towards the nearest orc and stabbed it in the back of its head. Shrook! The orc screamed. He had stabbed as hard as he could, straining his wrists. The short sword was plunged into the head of the orc and blood splurted out, but it wasn't a fatal wound. The blade was barely able to penetrate the leather cloth, losing most of its power after breaking through the unexpectedly tough resistance. Without any hesitation, Sung-min let go out the short sword. He didn't even try to pull it back. The poison had already begun to spread. The blade of the short sword that was coated with poison would spread through the orc's entire body in a matter of minutes. For left human, kill! The orcs roared and charged forward together. Although they were bumbling onwards without any formation, their hideous visage and stocky bodies gave off an intimidating energy. Ha! Sung-min let out a deep breath out and pulled out 2 throwing knives. He began to revolve One Thunder again. Pa! He dove sideways, dodging the axe plunging towards his head, and twisted his back. Crash! One of his throwing knives hit its target and broke the skin of the shoulder of one orc. He wasn't aiming for a death blow. A small wound would be enough for his purposes. Leaving the knife buried, Sung-min quickly moved his body. You rat! An orc screamed loudly and swung his axe in a wide arc. Even if an orc could not cultivate internal energy, their strength was beyond that of an adult human. If Sung-min was hit, his body wouldn't be cut in half. Rather, his bones would be shattered into pieces. Sung-min wasn't able to block a blow of that caliber with his current physique. I can't get hit. Desperation was starting to set in for Sung-min, as there were still 3 orcs left. Any one of them could rip the body of a 14-year-old with their bare hands. Feeling the horror of the axe that flew past a few centimeters away from his chest, he immediately ducked and rolled onto the ground. As he was rolling, Sung-min switched the knife from his left hand to his right and swiftly stood up before throwing it towards an orc. KRGH. He did not utilize his internal energy in his throw. The orc seemed a little surprised but was able to block the flying knife by batting it away with his axe. This was enough of a distraction. Sung-min immediately pulled out his spear and prepared to risk his life on the line for this fight. WRAM. Sung-min's spear was able to pierce through the orc's chest. Blood spurted out from the orc's mouth. He attempted to pull out the spear with both of his hands, but, along with a terrible foreboding, the spear started to come loose. No, it was better for him to abandon the spear as the nearest orc roared and swung his axe down towards Sung-min's head. Crew. Lee Sung-min desperately hoisted the spear shaft up in an attempt to block the oncoming blow. Crash! The spear broke into 2 pieces. You son of a b***tch. Sung Min cried out at the top of his lungs over the loss of his spear. Nonetheless, Sung Min was still attacking the orc as he was screaming, the move rising soul light from the chasing soul spear technique. The end of the spear would soar into the air to strike the enemy. Although half the spear was gone, Sung Min used the remaining end to thrust the shaft upwards like a sword. The orc who was in a hurry to retreat was grazed in the chin by Sung Min's strike. I already used the poison. It's not enough. Most of the poison was smeared on the head of his spear that was already inside the other orc. Sung Min didn't have enough poison on hand. Luckily for him, the blunt blow from the axe had caused the broken spear shaft to be jagged with wood spikes. Krug, summoning every last bit of his strength, he stabbed it straight through the orc's neck. Its mouth flung open. One left. Although Sung Min was tired, one orc wasn't that difficult to handle. He looked around his surroundings while breathing heavily. The 4 orcs who were inflicted with the paralysis poison was lying on the ground twitching, and the one whose neck was penetrated with the shaft was already dead. Tired. Lee Sung Min spat onto the ground and muttered. It was stupid. It was stupid to fight against multiple opponents that he wasn't completely ready for. But still, a sense of accomplishment welled up within him. He was able to take on 5 orcs alone. This was something he never even dreamt about in his past 14-year-old self. Sung Min contently grinned as he headed towards the orcs who were flinching, to gouge their eyes out. Chapter 8. It's real. Hans requested it be done, but he truly didn't expect Sung Min to succeed. He ordered a 14-year-old boy to capture 5 orcs. Moreover, the boy wasn't someone who had mastered martial arts, nor was he a person who had mastery in magic. He was a 14-year-old no-class. Such a kid brought 10 orc eyeballs. I was about to die. Lee Sung Min looked terrible. He had become a dirty mess after the ambush. He was sweating and his face was smeared with dirt, permeating the air with the stench of blood and sweat. You didn't just collect these from the ground, right? How can I get orc eyeballs from the ground that easily? You could have come across a corpse. You just don't want to give me what we promised, right? Lee Sung Min asked. Hans laughed at that. After a bout of laughter, Hans shook his head. No, it's a promise, so I'll give it to you. Hans muttered as he pulled out the interdimensional pocket. Now, hey race, the interdimensional pocket worth 600,000 Eri. Lee Sung Min grabbed the pocket from him with the speed of lightning. He smiled and shoved it into his pocket. Thank you. Finally, you seem like a child when smiling. Hans laughed. What do you mean seems like a child? I am one. What? It's been about 2 weeks since I've gotten to know you. I've never seen a child like you. How do you have such a mature mentality? It was an accurate inference. Lee Sung Min puckered his lips and muttered. I think it's normal. Ha 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 ha. Hans laughed while holding onto his stomach. It was hard acting like a genuine kid. Sung Min thought that as he pulled out 5 axes. Buy these for me, please. Hey, you shameless brat. Why would I buy this? The edge is chipped and the weapon as a whole is about to break too. You can just retrieve the steel from it and buy that. What kind of an idiot would buy steel that isn't even clean? But I brought this heavy thing for you, that's your problem. I'm not buying this. Hans seemed to have some kindness in him, so Sung Min had a go at attempting to sell the axes off. But it seemed like he didn't have that much goodwill to buy trash. His shoulders drooped. Don't do that. Hans grumbled. Would you consider becoming a mercenary? Hans suddenly asked. A mercenary? Yeah. Mercenary. Lee Sung Min knew about them. In his past life, he belonged to a mercenary guild. It was one of the easiest jobs that a no-class could get. There were many merits in becoming one. The guild would take commissions, but it would be easier to trade items through mercenary guilds, and it would be easier to arrive in most cities with a mercenary ID. It was easy to get jobs, too. There was usually at least one in every city. The jobs assigned to mercenaries were different, but they would still be able to carry out jobs to earn money and recognition. I don't have any plans yet. Lee Sung Min shook his head. His past self was a C-rank mercenary. It wasn't the best. Most of the mercenaries were ranked C. C rank. That was essentially the limit of a no-class. Perhaps, if he had come across fortuitous opportunities, he might have reached a rank higher than that, but it was impossible for the average no-class, such as himself. I would be a F-rank mercenary if I signed up now. The lowest ranking was G. Ly, he started from G rank and made it up to C rank. The mercenaries within the same rank also had great disparity in strength between one another. To say there were different levels of strength such as C+, C, and C-, he was a mere C. He already knew the process of becoming one and knew that there wouldn't be much benefits in joining. Though it was simple to enter the guild, rising up in ranks was far more difficult. Dropping in ranks, however, was an easy matter. Just a few botched missions would cause a person to drop down by one rank. It would be better to conserve his energy for the time being and sign up later on. Starting out as a D ranker would put him in a better situation as compared to starting as a G ranker. His aim was to qualify to be a D ranker. He had no plans on entering the guild till then. If you don't want to, then it's fine, Hans muttered. But becoming a mercenary isn't that bad. A lot of benefits come along in doing so, I suppose. He already knew about said benefits. The stench of battle still clung to his body, distracting him. Can I leave? Leaving once you've finished your business with me. You uncharming boy. Do you enjoy getting charm from a boy? No. Leave. Hans waved his hands. Sungmin bowed and grabbed his bag from the ground. Then he moved away from Hans. Hey, take your trash. Hans yelled at him, but he ignored it. *K, you stink. He heard such a remark once he returned to the inn. A girl with fair cheeks looked at Sungmin and held her head. He knew that he stunk, so he didn't react to it. I know. You talked disrespectfully to me again, the girl said in a sharp tone. Her name was Lula. She was Jack's daughter. Our difference in age is only by 1 year. It's funny to have to call a person just a year older than you your older sister. What's funny about that? You're still younger than me. You should act more mature before people address you as their older sister. Lee Sungmin put down his bag. Lula was 15. She was older than him by a year. However, he had no intentions on addressing her as his older sister. He looked to be 14 years of age, but he was actually a 27-year-old man. Referring to a 15-year-old girl that way was something Sungmin could not bear to do. What about Jack? He's in the kitchen. The meal today is mushroom stew and chicken. It should be delicious, right? Lula said laughingly. Jack's cooking was exemplary. If Sungmin had to pick out 2 things that he liked the most, it would be the increase in speed of his cultivation methods and Jack's culinary skills. He couldn't eat a proper breakfast as he left the inn early in the morning. Therefore, his breakfast comprised of mainly hard bread. His lunch was comprised of just bread, too. What did you eat for breakfast? Bread, fried eggs, and potatoes. Probably tasted great. Dad's good at cooking. You should leave a bit later so you can eat breakfast together with us. Sitting on the table, she grumbled as she swung her legs. Sungmin smiled bitterly at that. There was a reason why he had to leave so early. In the morning, there were fewer people. Usually, the forest would be crowded with otherworlders later on during the day. If he were to come across another person in the forest, annoying issues might arise. Instead of having to deal with the possibility of encountering matters like that, it was better to leave early with some hard bread. However, he'll be able to hunt with ease tomorrow. With the help of the interdimensional pocket, it would be convenient to bring more food along with him. He didn't bring milk before for fear of it spoiling midway, but he would be able to bring some in the future by using the interdimensional pocket. Milk was important. He was currently growing. If he didn't maintain a balanced diet, he might not grow to be as tall as his previous self. Why do you fight in the forest every day? You always return with a stench on you, she asked. She was probably bored, hence the small talk. There weren't many customers in the inn as it was located far away from the forest, and the customers who visited were usually Jack's regulars who just wanted to have a meal. Of course, there would not be anyone near Lulla's age. Lee Sungmin was a friend that she did not have since a long time ago. I'm an otherworlder. I need to hunt monsters to earn money. Do you think I'm stupid? Otherworlders don't have to hunt. They can just get a job and work, Lula retorted. He could only smile bitterly in response. Lula was right. There were easier ways to live in area. Becoming a mercenary and hunting monsters like Lee Sung-min did in his past life was just one of the various methods for survival. Usually, the otherworlders who had no power would get jobs. How about working at our inn? I think my dad likes you. I don't know how to cook or clean. That was a lie. He knew how to do such things. It was the first task the mercenary guild made him do after his registration. However, he didn't want to. He didn't want to waste his precious return to the past by engaging in menial tasks such as hard labor. But what if you die? They'll try not to. Easier said than done, is it not? Of course I know that. I almost died today. I don't get it. Isn't it better to work at an inn than to put your life at risk? Lula grumbled. She might be right. Lee Sung-min knew from experience that what he planned to do might just be a stupid aspiration. Call me when it's dinner time, he said as he climbed up the stairs. He knew that the outcome may be bleak, but he wanted to start all over again. A life better than before.